On this edition with Read with Ronald, I read the rest of the God Don't Like Ugly series, which is God Ain't Blind, God Ain't Through Yet, and God Don't Make No Mistakes. Post-production Ronald here. This video was originally supposed to be all 3 books in one video, but what had happened was I got done editing it. When I finished editing it, the final length was 3 hours long. So instead of giving y'all one 3-hour long video, I decided to give y'all 3 1-hour long videos. Each book is gonna get its own video, but as you're watching, just keep in mind that this was all supposed to originally be one video. Honestly, I had no plans on finishing this series. After I read the sample chapter for God Ain't Blind, I was like, I don't want to read this because it's gonna be a rehash of God Don't Play. Somewhere along the line about April, I was like, I kind of want to finish the series just to see like what else is gonna happen, because I felt like the series was starting to fall off, but I decided to go ahead and give it a chance and see how the rest of the series would go. I suggest that you go watch the first 3 videos on the first 3 books so you can get the full understanding of what's going on in the series. But if you don't want to do that, I'll give you a quick little recap of what happened. Hello, on this edition of Read with Ronald, I'm back with my friend Tati Simone. She's back. We doing another book swap. This time we reading 2 books I recommended. The first one we gonna get into is God Don't Like Ugly.
Let's give it a trigger warning before we even get into it.
This book has themes of molestation, of abuse towards a child. It has themes of murder.
Yeah. Abuse is explicit, so keep that in mind while you're reading this book.
I was going on a road trip and I needed something to read. So I wanted to read this other book by her. It's called Miss Wiggins, but I wasn't familiar with her writing style. So I got a book that was cheaper by her first to see if I would like it. And so I got the free sample of this and I got engrossed. So I bought the whole thing. And that's how I got this.
This is Annette Good. This is what she looks like. She's a plus size, dark skinned little girl. Her mom is Gussie Mae. They're from Florida. And they moved to Ohio, to Richland, Ohio, with this lady named Scary Mary. And she ends up growing up there with her mom, because her dad ends up leaving. It's her mom, her, and this man named Mr. Boatwright. They all live in the house together. And then we meet these other 2 characters who turn out to be her best friends, which are, Rhonda is her best friend. And then there's Pee-wee, which is this scrawny little boy who got all the gossip at the town.
I wanted this man to be exposed for the man that he was. I wanted this man to suffer the public humiliation that he deserved. But now that I'm older and now that I'm wiser, I feel like even if he had been exposed, nobody would have believed in that. Just like he said in the book, nobody would have believed her. I feel like nobody would have believed her.
The benefit of the doubt part is that as a parent, you can't protect your child from everything, and you don't know everything. Your child will always be in some type of harm. It's hindsight is 2020. Your child will always be in some type of harm. It's gonna always be something you could do better. But the second part is the arrogance of it all. And thinking that you know somebody's heart and you really don't know. You don't know how they are, who they are, and thinking that, oh yeah, I do, because she thought she did know everything. And the sad thing is, Annette was really protecting her because she's like, oh, this will kill my mama. So after he dies and Ray graduates, Pee-wee decided to take himself to Vietnam because he said, I'm gonna become a real man.
Oh yeah, Rhoda got married to Otis. She got married to Otis, moved down to Miami.
Rhoda has a baby, names the baby David. The baby dies.
I can't even be surprised with the turn that Annette took, because given how her life had gone up to that point, I feel like Gussie Mae and Boatwright primed her to go down that road. Because Gussie Mae, whether she meant to or not, exposed her to that life by having her around Scary Mary and accidentally, showed off her skills in front of her daughter without her knowing. And then Boatwright, of course, was paying her every time he molested her. I felt like they primed her to go down that road.
But you gotta know, anytime Rhoda say, yeah, my cousin in Alabama, he died like that. That she didn't kill somebody. Freak accidents happen all the time. I saw on TV that like this man, he was drunk and he fell down the stairs. Y'all, your best friend. But Annette was just so scared. She said, I have to get out this friendship. So that's what happened. They got out the friendship.
She was like, no, man, this too much. You done killed 4 people and now I know.
I enjoyed this book. I actually really did enjoy this book. And I think it's also different. Also perspective coming from me, because I am a woman that like, it is triggering. It does go into grave detail, but it's nothing that like, because I had to skip over some pages. But it's like, it sounds so terrible to say it, but it's like typical. Like, this is not a story that is unheard of.
It's like you know people in this book.
You know people in this book, but you do have elements that, like, okay, that is not a part of the normal story. Like, your best friend smothering the old man to death is not a part of the normal story that we have. But it was a really good book. I give this a 4.
On this edition of Read with Ronald, I have my friend Tati Simone here with me again, and today we're talking about God Still Don't Like Ugly.
It's a lot of recapping that we really didn't need, because I already read the first book. If you want to know these details, baby, go back and read God Don't Like Ugly, because we ain't God Still Don't Like Ugly. And I felt like for a few chapters we were still in the other book. In her head, she had all this stuff to say to her dad. And it's just like real life. You got all this stuff you gonna say. I'm gonna make him feel like this. I'm gonna bring it up all the time. She was ready to tear into him. But we never really got that.
Annette got 2 more siblings, Amos and Sandra. They both in Germany, in the army. I'm trying to comfort the sister I just met 2 days ago. I'm 35 years old. Lily Mae 34. This is the first time we meeting. And already I'm supposed to be sitting here trying to get to know her, but instead I'm having to comfort her because her mama done passed on.
She better than me. I gotta sit in the car. I wasn't trying to go inside anyways, but I gotta sit in the car because they racist, girl.
And then the fact that Lily Mae herself really couldn't even go in as Lily Mae. She had to cover herself with a big hat and a veil and sit in the back, sitting back there like some secret lover that's coming to say their final goodbyes.
For her own mother.
Here come Jerome. He done found out from Uncle Willie about Annette's past. This is true colors coming out. Because he can't even handle something that you not actively engaged in anymore. This is something that took place when you was 18, 19 years old. You 35 now.
Not only that, why are you as a grown man not questioning the uncle? I'm gonna leave it at that. Not questioning the uncle.
You know how like when you playing outside and you keep going in and out the house and your mama like, stop running in and out this house. That's how I was with Pee Wee at this point. I'm like, Pee Wee, stop coming in and out. Choose, you gonna be with Annette or not? I'm tired.
Because right now you playing with everybody's emotions.
You know you wanna be with this girl. Choose. Stop playing. Stop going between her and other women. Choose.
Other women we all know you're not going to be with.
And you know you're not going to be with them either. At the funeral, Annette and Rhoda finally talk to each other, and we find out Rhoda has had another child, a daughter that looked just like her named Jade. And it was funny when they first introduced Jade, Rhoda's like, oh, Jade, this is my friend Annette, and Jade's like, I don't care.
No, for real. Rhoda Jr.
I'm like, Rhoda Jr.
Literally.
I was kind of conflicted because I was like, on the one hand, I was glad that Gussie Mae did not know about the abuse, because it's like, well, at least I'm glad you didn't know, because I can say at least you weren't one of those moms who knew and just turned a blind eye because you needed a man.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you didn't know. But at the same time, I'm mad that you didn't know, because that really just really sincerely proves that you had no idea, no suspicion, no nothing about what went on in your house for a decade. I'm like, you had nothing.
Honestly, I think they all thought she was so good that they was not paying attention to that girl. And that was the problem. Here's another big part of how I know they would never believed her. Because when she said it, they was like, don't play like that.
For real.
Don't play like that. Don't play. What do you mean, don't play like that? I'm not playing. I'm not. They just made me mad because I'm not playing. And you want me to believe that you would have believed me when I first told y'all said, not him. Do not play like that. Who plays about that?
I'm like, Pee Wee, come on. Jerry, put the pieces together.
And realize y'all meant to be together.
I'm like, Jerry, put the pieces together. If she not with Jerome, you know Annette don't really be with nobody else like that. Come on now, put 2 and 2 together. If 2 and 2 is 4, and I'm like, if 2 and 2 is 4, if 4 and 4 is 8, and if Jerry and Annette was in the bed together after she broke up with Jerome, whose baby do you think this is, Jerry? So basically, Pee Wee like, this my baby, this my baby. That man ran over there, got the coat on the baby, got the coat on Annette, and ran off to Gussie Mae. This my baby, I'm marrying Annette. And it is what it is.
Literally, he was like, period, done. Anybody got any problems with that? I didn't think so.
Anybody got an issue? Anybody want to fight?
All he was waiting for, and Annette just sitting there. It's like, bro, Annette, if you would have told this man you wanted to be with him, he would have been with you yesterday. But they both was playing.
God Don't Play is the third book in the God Don't Like Ugly series. It takes place about 8 to 10 years after the end of the second book. So Annette, Rhoda, and Pee Wee, they're in their 40s now. They're like their mid-40s. And of course, Rhoda has her daughter Jade, who's 17 now. And Annette and Pee Wee, they have their daughter Charlotte, who's 9. Some of the things that's happened since the last book, Annette has been promoted at her job to a position of like a supervisor. Rhoda's recovered from her stroke, and she and Otis are going through another rough patch in their marriage. Annette and her mom, Gussie Mae, they're basically living the dream life at this point. Like, they have everything they could ever want. They've come so far from the first book when they was poor and eating out of trash cans. Like, life is good for them. But Jade is a little grown for her age because she's only 17. Annette and Jade are really close. Annette sees her as like a second daughter, of course, because she has her close friendship with Rhoda. She's a bit rebellious. She got a wild side like her mom. She's basically like the mini version of her mom. Otis's best friend, whose name was Bobby in the first book, but now his name is Ian Bullard. So his name is changed, but it's basically the same guy from the first book that Rhoda had the affair with and had a secret baby by. So basically, he's come to visit because he's gotten into it with his wife. Annette suspects that Bobby and Rhoda have resumed their affair under Otis's nose because Otis and Rhoda are in a loveless marriage. Basically, Otis be having affairs on Rhoda. Rhoda be having affairs on Otis. They be having these affairs on each other, but they get mad when they find out that the other one is having an affair. With the first 2 books, you could make the excuse that Gussie Mae was not ever home. She was never home, so you could make that excuse in the first 2 books that Gussie Mae was never home to know about the abuse, and because Annette would not tell her, she could not have known. But this paragraph, this pissed me off at Gussie Mae, because I'm like, Gussie Mae, you mean to tell me this man was abusing your child right across the hall from you while you were home, and you still did not know? You still did not know? You had no suspicion, no nothing. You didn't think to go in there and check on your child while she's supposed to be getting ready for church? Gussie Mae's defense for not knowing gets weaker and weaker with every book. That's all I'm gonna say is that Pee Wee keeps saying that he only has eyes for Annette and he's not interested in any other woman. But number one, she's traumatized because she's been abused since she was like 7 years old by this very older man. And then in her adult relationships, Levi cheated on her. Jerome put his hands on her and basically got super upset when he found out about her past. And Pee Wee himself was using Annette as a go-between girl. Like, he would be with a girl, and then when he broke up with that girl, he'd go get with Annette, and they would do what they do, and then he'd leave Annette. So I'm like, Pee Wee, you can't really be mad at Annette for feeling this way about you because you've shown this to her. She was with you experiencing it when you were doing it to her. So you can't really get mad at her for feeling like this. The big issue in this argument is that Annette says that she and Pee Wee have rarely discussed what she went through with Mr. Boatwright. And I'm like, that's why you're having all these insecurities with him now, because you haven't discussed your trauma with Pee Wee. You haven't discussed what it was like to go through that. And so it's like, because you haven't discussed these things with your husband, because you haven't discussed how this has made you feel and how this has made you like look at men, of course y'all are arguing about this now that there's an issue, because you haven't discussed this. You haven't come to a place where you can feel like you can trust your husband. Now granted, I didn't believe that Pee Wee was having an affair on Annette. I didn't believe that he was having an affair on her, but I wasn't surprised that they were arguing about this and that she felt that way. Basically, Jade is revealed as the stalker. I knew she was a stalker. Rhoda feels just like very undesirable because she feels like Otis does not want her like that. She feels like they're only just together for the comfortability of it all. And she said she was just resuming the affair with Bobby because she wanted to feel desired. Jade calls to apologize to Annette and to tell Annette that she just thought that she could take Pee Wee from her because she thought Pee-wee liked her like that, and she's basically like, I seen the way he always looks at you with so much love, and I just wanted that for myself, and so I thought maybe if I took Pee-wee from you, he would look at me like that. And Annette's like, he looks at me like that because he loves me, he's my husband, and you need to find somebody your age who will look at you in that same way. Basically, she gives her a piece of her mind, and basically Jay's like, well, auntie, do you forgive me? And Annette's like, yeah, I forgive you. This is gonna hurt me for a long time, it's gonna take you some time to get over, but I forgive you. Once Jade is revealed as a stalker, her insecurities are like, they're not addressed. It's like she just is like, oh well, it is what it is. It's like the insecurities are no longer necessary because the plot needs to move along. And I'm like, no, you need to address this, because you need to address this so this doesn't happen again. So y'all just saw that recap, so let's get into the rest of this series. So today's June 2nd. I've started reading God Ain't Blind. This book takes place about a year after the events of God Don't Play. Annette and Pee-wee are having issues once again in their marriage. Just like I said in the last book, y'all didn't discuss the issues y'all have going on. Once again, here we are. Annette has decided to have an affair on Pee-wee with this younger guy named Louis Baines. She was introduced to him through Rhoda. He's broke because he has this struggling catering business. She decides to have this affair with him because Pee-wee, in her point of view, does not desire her anymore, and she's really hurt about this because she's like dropped like 4 dress sizes and got a whole new makeover. But it seems like Pee-wee like doesn't pay any attention to her whatsoever. Like, he's not interested in anything that's going on with her. And instead of just talking to Pee-wee about this, she decides to have an affair instead. They haven't slept with each other in like a year. Pee-wee no longer has the drive that he had when they were younger, which is not uncommon. Men, as they get older, their drive goes down, but women, their drive goes up. And so I feel like that's what's happening here. And Rhoda's encouraging the affair. I'm like, Rhoda, how are you going to encourage Annette to have an affair on Pee-wee? And you've been friends with Pee-wee longer than you have been with Annette. And in the last book, you was the one fighting extra hard for them to be together. Make it make sense. Annette suspects that the whole reason that Rhoda is pushing her to have this affair and approving of it is because Rhoda herself is once again having another affair on Otis. And so Annette suspects that she feels guilty for having an affair on Otis. And so she figures if Annette has an affair too, she won't be as guilty because they both having affairs. If it hasn't already been established from the events of the first 3 books, Rhoda is not somebody you should be taking advice from. You should not be taking advice from somebody who just, when somebody gets on her nerves or when somebody gets in her way, she just kills them. I feel like this whole plot is going to piss me off because it's like, if you would just talk to Pee-wee, just talk to him. That's what the issue was in the last book. You wouldn't just talk to Pee-wee, sit down and have a conversation. You were just running around like a chicken with your head cut off, doing the most, not putting 2 and 2 together. And now here we are in this 4th book. Once again, this is an issue that if you would just sit down and talk to Pee-wee, but I feel like she's going to piss me off this whole book again. It's about 4 in the morning and I had to come talk. Annette is finna piss me off because it seems like every book she gets dumber and dumber. So like I said, Annette is having this affair with this guy named Louis. He's 30 and he's from South Carolina. He's very country. So after she gets done sleeping with him, Rhoda picks her up and Rhoda's covered her like car seats with plastic covers. And so Annette's offended. She's like, I'm not a dirty woman, Rhoda. And Rhoda's like, I covered my car seats because you be spilling barbecue sauce all over the place, because Pee-wee asked Annette to pick him up some barbecue, right? So they talk and Annette realizes that Louis would be the same age as her first unborn child that she got rid of in the first book when she was a teenager. Her and Rhoda, they joke about how ugly and useless their husbands are. So when she gets home, she gives Pee-wee the barbecue and Pee-wee's not really paying her no mind. He's sitting there grubbing and he's not really paying her no mind. So Annette tries to talk to him and he's like, oh, were you saying something? And so she gets pissed off. She basically starts trying to resolve the issue. She's like, what's the issue between us? And Pee-wee's like, there is no issue. He basically accuses her of being the one that's acting a fool because she's going through menopause. And Annette's like, it's not menopause. And she starts trying to resolve the issue. So I will give her that. She does try to address the issue, but Pee-wee falls asleep on her. So then Annette goes upstairs and she showers. So she calls Louis and her and Louis are talking. Louis says that having an affair with Annette is dangerous because she's married and he doesn't want any issues with Pee-wee. And Annette tells him, if you got somebody better, go on ahead and go on because I ain't finna wasting my time. And Louis is like, there's nobody else. And then Pee-wee comes upstairs. So Annette hangs up all quick. And Annette thinks he's coming upstairs to like sleep together. But he just asks her to scratch his back and she's disappointed. The next morning she gets up. She's all happy because because she slept with Lewis, she's like, as long as she can keep Pee-wee happy with like simple stuff like scratching his back, he won't get all in her business. So then she goes downstairs and she's laughing to herself, and Pee-wee comes downstairs. He's like, what's so funny? They roasting each other because Annette has lied and said she's joined a bowling team as her alibi. And so she tells the story of how like one of the women is looking for like a husband. And Pee-wee's like, well, I hope none of her bad habits rub off on you because you can't do no better than me. And Annette's like, oh, you want me to see if I can find out? And Pee-wee's like, girl, wasn't nobody lined up for you. You ain't no Halle Berry. And I'm like, okay, Pee-wee, pause. Let's not forget, and God still don't like ugly, Annette had Jerome while you was going back and forth between all these women. The reason Annette and Jerome didn't work out is because Jerome was colorist and he couldn't accept the fact that she used to be a prostitute. And the only reason y'all got together, she got pregnant. You finally stopped playing games. Let's not have selective memory, Pee-wee. Annette and Pee-wee, they have their daughter, Charlotte. She's 10. She's taken after Pee-wee in looks and personality, but she has Annette's desire to read. So Annette encourages Charlotte to read, but Annette does not know what to do with herself over the weekends. Because she don't know what to do with herself, she's considering writing a book to cure her boredom. Annette basically calls Lewis back, and she and Lewis make plans to meet up at the bar to have drinks. It's going to be her, him, and Rhoda at the Red Rose, because it was supposed to be her and Rhoda, and she just invites Lewis along. So then Annette goes to work, right? So she and Rhoda get to talking on the phone, and Rhoda's basically encouraging her to be experimental with the affair because it'll be her first of many, but she's talking about she doesn't want to hurt Pee-wee. And I'm like, Rhoda, make up your mind, because you the one encouraging the affair, but you don't want to hurt Pee-wee because he's been your friend. She still loves Otis, but she's like, she understands that Otis cannot satisfy her physically, so that's why she has once again resumed her affair with Bobby. Of course, they're calling him by his new name, Ian Bullard, but like I said in God Don't Play, I'm calling him by his name that we met him with the first time, which was Bobby, because that was his name in the first book, God Don't Like Ugly, so I'm calling him Bobby. I'm like, I thought that was done in the last book because you said it was done, Rhoda, but now all of a sudden y'all back on again. And so basically while they're on the phone, Lewis calls. He wants to see how far they can take it. He invites her over for dinner. Basically, he's really feeling Annette, and he's planning to get comfortable around her and Charlotte and hoping that Annette will leave Pee-wee for him. Like, he's making a whole bunch of plans for them to be a family. He's planning to give her a key to the place. And so when Annette gets back on the phone with Rhoda, she's unsure of how far she wants this affair to go. And so Rhoda tells Annette that no woman is ever truly happily married and that Annette needs to enjoy this while she can. Rhoda cancels their drink date to go get with Bobby because he's in from London. And so then Annette calls Pee-wee at the barbershop, but Pee-wee doesn't pick up. It's another boy who tells her that Pee-wee has gone to his doctor's appointment, and he has a doctor's appointment every Friday for the past year, which is how long it's been since her and Pee-wee have slept together. So me reading this, I'm like, oh, something's wrong with Pee-wee's body. I don't know if there's a male version of menopause, but like he's going through changes with his body too. That's what I'm thinking, right? Annette gets on the phone. She calls Rhoda, and she's like, oh my gosh, Rhoda, I just found out that Pee-wee's having an affair. Annette, seriously? The boy just told you he's been going to the doctor for the past year. It's been a year since y'all have slept together. Something is wrong with Pee-wee's body, obviously. Come on now, Annette. This don't make no sense for her to be 46 years old and be this stupid. I will say this. I am enjoying this book a lot more than I expected to enjoy it. I thought I was going to hate it, but no, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Annette is going to piss me off this whole book. I can already tell, because why is your first thing, oh, he's having an affair? And my first thought is something's wrong with him. Like, make it make sense. And one more thing. I think that Lewis is trying to get to Annette's money. And the reason I think this is because, first of all, he's 30 years old. Annette is getting close to 50, and he's making all these plans to be in Annette's life and hoping that she'll leave Pee-wee for him, and he's making all these plans to be around Charlotte and stuff like that. And he's a struggling business owner, and Annette has money. So I think that Lewis is trying to get at Annette's money. He's not really interested in her like that. He's just trying to get at her money. So today's June 3rd. It's about 1 a.m. Where we left off was Annette called Rhoda talking about some Pee-wee having an affair. But Rhoda's not the one who picked up the phone. It was Jade. And so when Jade answered the phone, I'm like, why is Jade answering the phone? Isn't she supposed to be down in New Orleans? Jade still don't like Annette, and Annette does not believe the apology that Jade gave at the end of the last book. Rhoda eventually comes to the phone, and she tells Annette that her and Bobby almost got caught by one of her employees. that works at her daycare. And Annette basically says what she accidentally said to Jay, which is that Pee-wee's having an affair. Rhoda's like going back and forth. She's like, he might be having an affair because, he's at that age where men, they want to feel young again. But Pee-wee's my friend, so he might not be having an affair. But even if he is, you have Lewis now. And like, he's like going to be your first of many affairs. So enjoy it while it lasts. And I'm like, Rhoda, pick a side. Pick a side, Rhoda. And so Annette, she gets off the phone with Rhoda, and so she calls Pee-wee. Pee-wee answers this time. He's sounding tired, but he lies about what he's been doing. He says he's been there the whole time. And so he and Annette get to talking, and they get to talking about Lewis, because Pee-wee's talking about how he's going to go visit Lewis's restaurant to support a black business. And, he's basically talking about how, Lewis seems like a sissy. He seems like he's soft and stuff like that. And he just cares about too much about his looks. It's very obvious that Pee-wee is feeling down about himself because he's gotten older and he's not as good looking as he used to be, as Annette describes him. And so it's very clear that Pee-wee is jealous, and he being Pee-wee, because this is the same mess he did in the second book when Annette was with Jerome. He was downplaying Jerome and acting like Jerome wasn't all that. He's doing the same mess with Lewis. For some reason, Annette's brain just seem to have stopped functioning after the second book. So instead of seeing it as how Rhoda has explained it to her, she's, oh no, this is proof that he's having an affair. He's very clearly not having an affair. And Rhoda even tells her he's probably just embarrassed about whatever he's got going on, and he doesn't want to tell you because it's like a man problem. But Annette is like, oh no, I'm his wife. He should be able to tell me anything. I'm like, Annette, Pee-wee don't want to share everything with you. It's very clear Pee-wee does not want to share this with you because he doesn't want you to think of him as less of a man. And so, of course, Annette calls Lewis to tell him that Pee-wee is coming to the restaurant. Lewis, of course, he doing all that sweet talking, that flirting, telling Annette that she can trust him with anything. And so after this, she calls Rhoda again, and Rhoda tells her what she tells her and tells her to stop thinking about the past. And so that's when we get into what Miss Mary does best, which is giving us a rehash of the previous books. Now, the rehashing in this book is not that bad. And so then we get to how she and Lewis got together. A month after God Don't Play ended, that's when Pee-wee started acting weird. Annette, she notices he's acting weird. She gets the message that he's not really trying to sleep with her like that anymore. So she starts trying to find other stuff to occupy herself. Rhoda gives her this idea to hold a luncheon for her employees because she wants better relations with her employees because they always got an attitude with her because she's super dedicated to her job. She decides to do this luncheon, and that's how she gets introduced to Lewis. She goes to his restaurant to try his food, and he's flirting with her very heavily. She doesn't really rebuff him, playing that hard to get role, and then she switches into business mode. And so basically they've set up this trial run where he'll cater for her employees for every Monday, and the first meal is going to be complimentary because he wants to make a good impression. Obviously, Annette decides to accept the complimentary catering and is going to do even more with him catering wise, and she just likes the attention that he's giving her. And the reason she chooses to do Lewis's restaurant instead of going with her mom's restaurant is because Gussie Mae is very busy. They decide to go with Lewis to support another black business. Gloria from the last book, who was a suspect as one of the stalkers, she's back in this book. Annette, she does all the planning and stuff through Gloria. Annette notices that Gloria is starting to kind of copy her style, like the way she wears her hair and even the clothes that she's wearing. And Annette realizes that Gloria is kind of starting to look like how Annette used to look. She's bothered by that because she's like, oh, Gloria ain't really got no style. So it's like she's trying to copy off of me. So obviously I need to get myself together because why is she trying to copy me? Maybe because you've inspired her, Annette. I don't know. Rhoda called Annette to tell her that Jade was coming home. And basically, Jade has failed out of school. She's been driving Rhoda's parents crazy. She's coming back home. And Annette is she's annoyed that Jade is coming home. She's annoyed that Pee-wee's not paying her no attention. So she decides to use Lewis as a distraction. And so I get the feeling we're starting to get into how we got into this affair. What I'm liking about this book is that it's a return to realism. I feel like that's what we were kind of getting away from with God Don't Play. So far, it's looking like a 4. It's about 3 a.m. and I am on chapter 30. So Annette, she tells Pee-wee that Jade is coming back, and Pee-wee, of course, is not excited about that. And so after she gets off the phone with Pee-wee, Lewis calls, and he wants to go to lunch to discuss the business and stuff like that. They go to lunch, and he's flirting super heavily with Annette. She orders a salad, and everybody's looking at her crazy because they go to lunch at Antonio Santi's, which is the Italian restaurant Uncle Carmine's family used to own. Everybody, of course, in there knows Annette, and they looking at her crazy because because she don't order her usual stuff. Louis, even though he's looking at her crazy too, he gets fed up with the waiter and keep trying to encourage her to buy more food, so he goes off on the waiter. And so Annette tells this story to him about when her mom was working for the white families back in the day, and they would piss her off. She would put laxatives in their food and then would quit. And so she tells him this story to get him to be nice to the waiting staff, because he's like, if they were working for me, they'd be fired ASAP. And so basically they talk business. And we also get some more backstory on Louis. He was raised by his grandma and his aunts after his parents died in a boating accident. He came to Richland because his uncle had opened a restaurant, but his uncle got sick. He came up there to visit him, and then his uncle had a stroke, so he ended up taking over the restaurant after his uncle died from the stroke. It's very important to him that the business succeeds, and that's what pushes Annette to really agree to doing the catering contract. Even though she was already going to agree to it before, that's what really pushes her to be like, okay, we're gonna do it. Louis starts flirting with her heavily, and he tells her that he wants her, and Annette is like, I'm married, and Louis is like, I don't care. And she also tells Louis that Pee-wee has been neglecting her physically in the romantic sense, and I'm like, why would you tell this man all your business? That's just going to encourage him more. And he starts doing some nasty things in the restaurant. She's flustered by this, but she's enjoying all of the attention. She gets back to work. She doesn't know what to do with herself. That Monday, Louis comes and caters, and he's very professional during the whole thing, but afterwards he calls her okay, so what are we doing? And Annette's like, I don't know yet. And so she talks to Rhoda, and Rhoda basically tells her that Jade is coming back that night with the guy she met down in Mexico. Bobby, he's going back and forth between London and Richland. His money is kind of a mess right now. His wife is sleeping with his best friend in Paris, and Otis almost caught them getting dirty in the laundry room. Annette thinks Otis already knows about the affair, but Rhoda's like, no, he hasn't caught on. Honestly, I'm inclined to agree with Annette, because how has Otis not noticed Rhoda has been having an ongoing affair with his best friend for 20 years? Does he not question why his best friend keeps coming in to visit so much? And so Annette is worried that Rhoda's going to be having all her time taken up dealing with Jade, but Rhoda's like, nothing's going to come between us. But Annette's not really believing that. And so she tells Rhoda about Louis, and Rhoda tells her, okay, get it, girl. Remember, life is short. Annette goes to dinner that night with Louis, and they agree to start the affair, and that's when we get to where we were at the beginning of the book. 2 weeks after that, Annette talks to Gussie Mae. Gussie Mae finally shows up in the book. I'm surprised Gussie Mae and Scary Mary haven't shown up earlier. Scary Mary still has not shown up, but Gussie Mae finally shows up about halfway through the book. Annette talks to Gussie Mae. Gussie Mae basically, fussing at her, doing what Gussie Mae do. And she tells Annette to get her life in order, get her marriage in order with Pee-wee, because her, Frank, and Charlotte are going down to the Bahamas for the summer. One of her old employers from back in the day in Florida died, and the son wants them to watch the house until he can get down there to check it out. And they agree because it's a free trip to the Bahamas. So Annette is like, I'm not comfortable with you taking my daughter to the Bahamas, but everybody argues her down about it. So she agrees to it. And Gussie Mae tells her that Pee-wee said it was okay for Charlotte to go. That's why they keep telling her, oh no, we're taking her. And Annette's like, he ain't tell me. So then Gussie Mae tell her to get it together with Pee-wee. Charlotte gets on the phone. She starts mouthing off. Annette tells her, you keep it up, you ain't going. And so Charlotte, she gets it together. Frank tells her that she's being difficult and being mean. And Annette is trying to figure out how everybody knows her business about what's going on with Pee-wee. And I'm trying to figure it out too. She decides to go to the mall. And so while she's at the mall, she runs into Jade. Jade starts throwing shades, but Annette, she not letting it bother her, and she even throws some shade back, talking about how Jade flunked out of college. So that gets Jade super upset, and she starts being like, oh, well, they just wasn't letting me be my full potential, all this other type of stuff. And she introduces the man that's with her. It's a guy from Mexico. His name is Marcello. That is her fiance, but he doesn't look too confident about being her fiance. Annette, she goes shopping, and she calls Louis, and Louis tells her he wants to take her out and, go do what they do. So she's feeling super happy, right? So she runs into two of Rhoda's employees, and they try to get some, some dirt on Jade. Annette not paying them no mind because she's excited about Louis. So she goes home, runs into Pee-wee. Pee-wee has been out fishing. Annette thinks he's really been out cheating, but she has no proof that Pee-wee's been having an affair, and she's super happy with her affair, so she don't even really care like that. They do what they do. Oh, you ain't no Halle Berry. Oh, well, you ain't no young guy either, And basically, Pee-wee, he very insecure about his looks, because he getting older, obviously, clearly, but Annette not seeing it. And so Pee-wee, he starts talking about how he went to Lewis's restaurant to get some food. He talks about how Lewis is like a sissy and stuff like that. And he's also like, oh, I had to straighten him out over my meal. Basically trying to, act like he's the man and stuff like that. And Annette like, yeah, okay, whatever, because she's sleeping with Lewis. That night, Gussie Mae, Frank, and Charlotte come over when Annette getting ready to leave. And she's like, oh, well, I had plans to go out, but everybody guilts her into staying home because, oh, we're not going to see you again until August. And, family comes first. I'm not mad at them for making her stay home because, yes, she do not need to go out having an affair on her husband. She need to be home with her family who getting ready to leave for 3 months. But Annette, of course, is pissed off. That's where I left off at. It's still June 3rd. It's about 7 o'clock in the evening. And I just made it to chapter 40. Annette, she still can't sleep. And so she goes downstairs. She drinks some wine. That puts her to sleep. So when she gets up in the morning, Pee-wee's downstairs making a bunch of noise. And he accidentally drops a glass and breaks it. So she gets down there and she's like, what are you doing? He ended up cutting his finger, so she, patches him up. And so while she's patching him up, he gets to ranting about Jade. And he starts, opening up to Annette a little bit. But Annette, being Annette, she not really paying him no mind like that, like she should be, because she's too wrapped up and focused on Lewis. And he tells Annette that she didn't need to change herself for him. And Annette gets upset because she's like, I didn't change myself for you. I changed myself for me because I wanted to do something for me. He liked her as she was, and Annette's upset about that. And so as they're talking, she gets hopeful that Pee-wee show interest in her again, but of course he doesn't. He's going on a fishing trip for a few days. She ends up taking off from work and she's lonely. She waits a few hours and then she calls Lewis and she apologizes for missing their date. And so Lewis tells her not to worry about it, they'll make it up. So they decide to make it up by going to Antonin Santi's restaurant. And while they're there, Scary Mary finally appears in the book. She being Scary Mary, she's trying to get Lewis to cater this company event that she plans on putting on at Antonin Santi's. She's, just basically going in on Lewis about how he looks and how he acts and stuff like that. So he gets flustered and he runs out to the bathroom. She giving Annette all these looks and Annette's like, what? And Scary Mary like, I know what you up to. And Annette, she trying to do what she do. Oh, it's not like you think it is, but Scary Mary not stupid. Your lipstick is all over his jaw. Wipe it off. And she tells Annette that she's not going to say nothing. And then after Lewis comes back, Scary Mary wipes the lipstick off herself and leaves. So Annette, she loses her appetite. So she and Lewis, they go to his apartment. His apartment is a hot, raggedy mess. And he has a cat that he takes care of. And Annette makes this point to talk about how, oh, he took in a cat from a shelter. If all men were as caring and thoughtful as he was. And I'm like, you talking about thoughtful and kind and caring, but he's having a whole affair with a married woman. And this is the type of man you want every man to be like. Annette, get your priorities straight. A bat flies into the house and gets tangled up in her hair. And so, they have to wrestle it out. And so Annette thinks that God is trying to tell her something. And she's like, she listening, but she not fully listening. So she's like, she gonna continue doing what she want to do. And I'm like, Annette, you are stupid. So they end up going to the motel that they first met up at. Lewis is super embarrassed. Annette is super embarrassed. He keeps telling Annette that he's sorry and that he can't live like how he wants to live and run a restaurant at the same time. But after a year, he'll be able to. So Annette tells him it's fine. They embarrassed. But then they eventually get to what they was going to do. So after they get done, Lewis asks her to tell about herself some more. And so she shares, about what went down with her dad and stuff like that. Lewis also grew up similarly. He grew up poor without his father. So that's something they relate on. And then Annette shares like how blessed they are. Lewis seems like a gold digger to me, but he don't seem that way to Annette. Because, he's talking about I love successful, sophisticated black women and stuff like that. And I'm like, you're seeming like a gold digger. Earlier in the book, Annette made this point to talk about how vigorously Lewis pursued her. And of course, she's taking joy in it. But I'm like, no, he's vigorously pursuing you because he seems like a gold digger. She leaves and goes home. Lewis wants her to stay, but she's like, no, I'm sore, so I'm going home. So she goes home, and it's lonely, and Rhoda calls her, and it's like, girl, look in the paper. And Annette's like, is this something I need a drink for? And Rhoda's like, yes. So she gets a drink. She looks in the paper. Jade and Marcelo, they're getting married. Annette's like, oh, is this it? I already knew this. And basically, Rhoda's upset because it was such a short notice. She basically asked Annette to, come to the wedding for support. And I'm like, you want Annette to go to the wedding of the girl who stalked her and was trying to kill her and trying to take her man? And Annette, being Annette, agrees to go. And so Rhoda's going to have Lewis cater the wedding, and Bobby will also be at the wedding. Annette is depressed, but she has Louis to keep her occupied. Pee Wee comes back home from his fishing trip, and he starts criticizing Annette's appearance. She gets annoyed with it, and she tells him that Rhoda wants them at the wedding. Pee Wee says he's not going, and if Annette chooses to go, she done lost her mind. And so Annette, she's really taken aback by this for some reason, because she's like, oh, Pee Wee's not the Pee Wee that I married and stuff like that. And I'm like, girl, yes he is. Pee Wee has been acting consistently the same since the first book. And so Annette don't know what's going on with him, so she ends up getting a phone call. It's from Gussie Mae. We having a good time down here. Charlotte got herself stung by an eel again. Annette tells him about the wedding, and Gussie Mae says, oh, tell Rhoda we can't make it. We can't be reached. We don't know when we coming back. And so then, of course, because Annette took off of work the day before, that was a Monday, she missed the Monday luncheon. So when she gets there, she learns that the luncheon was super successful at work. But Louis has not been paid. He tells her this when they're sleeping together, that he has not been paid for any of the luncheons. So Annette decides to take it on herself to make sure that he's paid, because she wants him to be successful. So when she gets to work, she gets that squared away. And when she gets to work, she's got a few missed calls from some debtors from Rhoda and Louis. She calls Rhoda first, but Jade picks up. Jade trying to, talk smack again, but she gets slapped by Rhoda. Rhoda basically tells Annette that she needs Annette to handle the catering through Louis, and so Annette agrees and also says that she'll be at the wedding, but nobody else. So then Annette calls back Louis. He wants to have dinner again, but she declines, and she regrets declining because then they missed their Thursday get-together. Rhoda couldn't be her alibi because she's busy with the wedding, and Pee Wee was seen by Rhoda coming out the pharmacy, and Rhoda said he looked like he wasn't doing too well, so Annette tries to call Pee Wee to see what's going on with him because he done left work. He not picking up for like 2 hours, so she rushes home, and she gets there, and it's him, Otis, and Bobby in there just chilling. And she don't recognize Bobby at first, but after a while they recognize each other. They talk, everybody comment on her weight loss, and then Pee Wee basically says, oh, I didn't pick up the phone because I thought it was like one of my employees and I didn't want to be bothered. And he tells Annette that the reason he was at the pharmacy was because he was getting salve for Charlotte, who once again got stung by an eel. So Annette leaves. She drives past Rhoda's to talk to her, but Rhoda's not home, and she sees Marcelo sitting on the porch looking defeated, and that is where I left off. My prediction is that Louis is going to be a gold digger. Everything's going to come out at the wedding about their affairs, and it's just going to be a hot mess. And I want to see what Pee Wee's going to do. I want to see if Pee Wee ends up divorcing Annette because of this, or if he decides to stick it out with her because, you know what, we've been married this long and we might as well keep going. And Annette thinks that Pee Wee is getting like aids to help him in bed, and she's only doing this so she can justify having an affair with Louis. And I'm like, no, I feel like he probably is just, feeling down about himself because he's getting older. But Annette don't see it. So I can't wait to see her with the egg on her face when she realized that she'd been wrong the whole time and she cheated on her husband for no reason. So it's almost midnight, and I just finished the book. Annette has to be one of the most dumbest protagonists that I have read this year. And it makes me sad because, the first book, she wasn't really all that dumb, but we on book 4, and it just seemed like she get dumber with every book. When Annette gets done writing by Rhoda's house, she go to the convenience store. She runs into one of Rhoda's employees. Her name's Ryrita. And Ryrita, she's the one that don't got a man. So she basically gossiping about Jade, and she gonna get Jade a cheap wedding present. She plan on finding her a man. And she mentions how her cousin Lizelle is trying to hook her up with Louis, and Annette gets a little bit jealous, but Ryrita like, oh, Louis not my type. So Annette gets back home, and she gets pissed off because Pee Wee turned the answering machine off when Otis and Bobby were hanging at the place, and he never turned it back on. So she gets pissed, and she turns it on, and she calls Louis, and her and Louis make plans. Then he tells her to move on from Jade, and he also starts revealing some of his backstory. My ex-fiance ran off with my cousin and the baby that I thought was mine, but it was really his, and that's why I moved up here to Richland also. And he hasn't been very successful with women, and so Annette, she pitying him. And he starts fantasizing about them and what they could be, and Annette's like, okay, hold your horses. This ain't gonna become nothing serious because I'm still in love with my husband. So then they make plans to meet. So then they meet that Thursday. And then that Saturday is the wedding. She goes to the wedding. Rhoda's got it all nice and decorated like how she would, and Otis and Bobby sitting there not dressed up. They hit on her a little bit, and then they tell her that Rhoda's in the room. So then Annette goes to Rhoda in the room. Rhoda's in there, hot mess, panicking because she wants everything to go off well. And Annette tells her not to worry so much. Rhoda's like, Jade is her only hope at having grandkids. And while they're talking, she says that Marcelo seems really nervous about marrying Jade, and Jade's running through all this money. She done ran through $10,000 in like a week. So Annette goes downstairs to talk to Louis. they talking, they flirting, they doing what they do. Scary Mary catches them and tells them they need to get a room, and Annette needs to stop leaving her lipstick on his chin. And so Annette, she goes and gets herself together. Then she hears the phone ringing. Nobody answers it, so she answers it. It's Marcelo. Marcelo says he's not marrying Jade and he's getting on the first flight home to Mexico. So Annette's trying to talk him into coming back to get married, and he's like, no, Jade just forced me into the wedding. I didn't want to do it, but she told me that she was in charge and we were doing things her way. She plans to basically live off her parents for the rest of her life. So Annette is pissed off, and Marcelo says he's not coming back, and he hangs up. So then Jade comes in and she starts, just going off on Annette, talking about something. You should be glad I even let you come to the wedding after how you treated me last year. And so Annette tells her, Marcelo just got off the phone. He said he's not coming. Jade has a panic attack and falls out and has to go to the hospital. So Annette and Scary Mary and some of the other women, they take care of all the guests. They feed everybody, get everybody home. After she does all that, she goes home. She gets home. Her dad calls because somehow they got the news about what happened to Jade. And he tells her that Jade got what she deserved because she shouldn't have been acting a fool and she shouldn't have dated outside her race. And so Annette rightly tells him, you want to talk, Mr. I left my wife and daughter to go be with a white woman and had all these extra kids and didn't come back into my life until I was 35. And so after Annette gives him the business, Frank get off the phone. So then Pee-wee comes in. Pee-wee talking smack about it too. They get to talking because Pee-wee's starting to confess about what's been going on. Annette tells him, I already know. So Pee-wee's like, what do you know? And Annette, she started getting riled up like she ready to fight. Pee-wee confesses what's been going on. It turns out I was right. Of course I was. It turns out he had cancer, and the doctor visits to a doctor who specialized in cancer treatment. So he's in remission, but he's still in treatment. Annette feels horrible because she thought he was having an affair. She tells him that, and he's like, I've already told you I'm never going to be with another woman but you, so why do you keep jumping to this? I swear, Pee-wee always says what I'm thinking every book. He always says what I'm thinking. The only time I was against Pee-wee was in God Still Don't Like Ugly because he was doing too much. But Pee-wee always says what I'm thinking because Annette just don't be thinking. So he tells her about the cancer and stuff. Annette feels horrible. But she decides to continue on her affair with Lewis. Pee-wee's like, oh, I want to take you on a getaway. Annette's like, no, we don't need to do a getaway. So he's like, let's have a cookout instead. But he's like, oh, I just be joking when I be talking about him like that. And so he decides to invite all these people as goodwill. Annette's like, let's hold off on that for now. And so he decides he wants to get back to sleeping with Annette. Before they do, Dissy Mae calls and she says that she needs a new wig because the Bahamas that messed up her hair. After that, they go upstairs, they sleep together. It's not good at first, but it gets there. Annette calls Rhoda the next morning. Jade is fine. And Annette doesn't tell Rhoda what's going on with Pee-wee. And she decides to continue her affair with Lewis until Pee-wee can get back to satisfying her how she likes. And then she'll drop him gently. Annette has lunch with Rhoda that Tuesday. And she tells Rhoda, the basics about Pee-wee's condition. Jade comes home that Wednesday. And Annette continues to have her affair with Lewis. But it gets out of hand because the money starts going from Lewis buying everything to Annette buying everything. She ends up making up an invoice and taking $3,000 out of her company money to pay for Lewis's broken oven. And he refuses to accept the money at first because of his ego, but he takes it. When Annette tells Rhoda, Rhoda calls her stupid for doing that. And she's suspicious about the oven. But Annette, of course, she's like, oh no, Lewis is a good man. He just needed some help. And Rhoda suggests that Annette's having a midlife crisis. So she decides that she, Annette, Lewis, and Bobby should all go to a getaway spa. And Annette decides that that's what they're going to do. And the getaways don't cost like $900 a night. And Annette knows she's going to be paying for her and Lewis. And so she decides to do it reluctantly. And so she tries to get in contact with him, but he's nowhere to be found. So she goes looking for him. While she's out looking, she decides to call Pee-wee. He's being all sweet with her. And so she feels bad. She regrets having the affair. And she decides after the getaway that she's ending it with Lewis. So she gets over to his apartment. And he in there on the phone talking smack about her to another woman. And he running her for money. And he plans to run her for some more money. So after he gets done talking on the phone to who is his fiance, Annette makes her presence clear. Lewis is like, oh, how you get in my house? What are you doing here? Why are you listening to my private phone conversations? And Annette goes off. So then Lewis, he reveals his true colors. I need $3,000 more. And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to tell your husband and I'm going to tell your boss. Being the dummy that she is, you would do that to me, Lewis? Yes, he would do that to you because he need money. And she even says herself that she's not that smart. And I'm like, finally, you said something that makes sense, Annette, because you are not that smart in this situation. And so Annette's like, you never cared for me, you never loved me. And Lewis is like, I mean, I cared for you, but not the way that you thought. Like, you were nice and I cared about you because you was a nice person, but I need this money. So they go back and forth. And after he reveals that he'll blackmail her, Annette basically beats him up and runs off. Well, she gets home and she calls Rhoda. Rhoda tells her that Jade is going down south to be with her white relatives. Annette starts crying and she tells Rhoda everything. Rhoda's like, do you want me to handle it? Annette's like, no, because I'm scared of what he'll do to you. And Rhoda's like, what he'll do to me? You need to be worried about what I'll do to him. And I'm like, duh, because hello, this is Rhoda we talking about. She didn't kill about like 4 or 5 people. And then Rhoda also suggests exposing him for like being a blackmailer, but Annette's like, no, I'll just handle it myself. So Pee Wee comes home with these roses and Annette breaks down crying. She tells Pee Wee, I cheated on you. And Pee Wee rightfully gets upset with her and he's like, I'm done, I'm through with you. After she tells him about the blackmailing stuff, he runs out the house. He beats up Lewis. Then he comes back, he gets his stuff and he leaves. So Annette calls Lewis to see like what went down, and he basically tells her, don't call me, don't come around me no more, keep your husband with you, keep your boss away from me, keep everybody away from me. So basically Pee Wee put the pause on Lewis. So then Pee Wee, he's gone for about a week, and Annette, she feeling bad about herself. And then Pee Wee comes back on her birthday to get more stuff, and he ignores her. Her parents and Charlotte are coming back, so they come back for the school year, and you know, Pee Wee and her, they just not in a good place until Thanksgiving because he refuses to like really talk to her like that. Like they sit down to talk for like a little bit and Pee Wee's like, you need to make this up to me. And then after that, they like on thin ice with each other until Thanksgiving. So when Thanksgiving rolls around, her parents and Charlotte, they going back to the Bahamas and they want Pee Wee and Annette to come back with them for Christmas. So Pee Wee's like, you want to go? Annette's like, I mean, if we go, we got to act like everything is all right. And Pee Wee's like, yeah, we do. So we need to get this resolved. So they decide they're going to work on their marriage. And that's how the book ends. I'm not surprised Pee Wee didn't leave her because it's Pee Wee. He been wanting her forever. Like, I don't think there's anything Annette can do to get rid of Pee Wee because Pee Wee is not going to leave her. Now, he might try to, you know, get back at her in the next book, but I don't think he gonna leave her or like cheat on her or nothing like that. He probably just gonna do something to like get back at her and then they gonna be good. That's how these two go. Okay, so I'm here to share my final thoughts on God Ain't Blind. So I thought I was gonna hate this book because I read the sample chapter at the end of God Don't Play, but I actually ended up really liking this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it did the same type of story as God Don't Play. It did it so much better in this book than it did in God Don't Play. This book was literally God Don't Play without the stalker storyline. It follows the same type of storytelling mechanic that God Still Don't Like Ugly used, but it worked better in this book. It's like this book took things that previous books did, but implemented it better and did it better, and that's why I got a 4. So hopefully she don't mess it up because I got 2 more books with her.